Hello, and welcome back to David Bowles' Human Meme. This is a podcast. I'm very delighted to have you back with me again. And if this is your first time, I hope you will enjoy learning today about Aristotle's Poetics. We're going to take a deep dive into the shallow end and have a primer experience about understanding what Aristotle meant when he was writing his Poetics about drama and the human condition. So we start with this idea. Creation of anything is all about intention. You do this to get that. Now, I believe that a trained intention, either through craft or schooling or experience and trial and failure, is much more valuable than just guessing. Now, there are amateurs out there who guess and create things and write things and produce things, and it's pretty right because their instincts are good. But if you have good instincts and good taste, and you combine that with proper training, you're unbeatable. If you aren't familiar intimately with Aristotle's Poetics, then you are just guessing about what's really going on a very low, deep level when it comes to creating a dramatic story. Art cannot be laissez-faire. Art must be compulsive and brutal, and that means the artist and the creator must be the same as well. The liveliest art is the movie. The most precious art is in paint and stone. But the most human art is that found on the live, dramatic stage where a live audience is observing a live performance and the object, the transition, the mimetic between audience and performer creates the object, which is the play. And this is how a proper play, a historical play, is constructed. Even a deconstructed play, even a different sort of play, even a non-traditional play still follows this structure I am going to share with you. Aristotle broke up the dramatic structure into these parts: plot, character, thought, diction, music, and spectacle. That's what you need to know. That's what you have to study. That's what you have to experiment with in order to take the next step into writing an interesting play that means something to people. So let's examine these in depth. What is plot? Plot is, very simply, what happens. Boy meets girl, dad kills wife, husband drowns, something awful and dramatic happens in the plot, because that is where the mimetic, the meme, the human meme, is set, expressed, and examined. The plot is what is known, shared, and discarded between people. Character. Those are the people in the play. And how many people you have in a play is completely arbitrary and up to you. But character is important because they mean something, because these are the devices, the vessels of how the mimetic, how the story is conveyed to the audience. Thought. Thought is probably the most overlooked and misunderstood of all of these parallel poetics. Thought is the big idea. What is this play about? Not what you're trying to say, not what your message is, but what is the impulse that made you decide to tell this story in this way? That is the thought. It's a dome covering the entire experience. And every action and reaction in your play needs to revert back to the idea of the thought. Is it serving the thought or not? If it's not serving the thought, it's out. Diction. Diction is merely how people speak. And we may think everyone speaks the same sort of language, and sometimes they do. Often they don't. And the good dramatist has characters in a play who speak differently from each other. They might have an accent. Their way of speaking might be stilted or smooth or loud or quiet. If you want to be heard, if you want someone to understand you, you don't shout at them, you whisper. So diction is an important part of the whole. You can't just throw away how your characters speak to each other. It cannot be ordinary. It must be interesting. It must be different. It must tingle the ear. Music. Yes, it's that. What you hear, musical things, characters singing on stage, a guitar, sound effects. It's important, and they should be written into the very bedrock of the play. Sounds, music. I remember watching rehearsal when I was a graduate student at Columbia University, and we had this really brilliant graduate director who was visiting from the UK, and he had this rather dry play that was assigned to him that he had to direct, and he needed a transition. And so he just kind of created this character who had a Spanish guitar, and every once in a while he'd just start kind of walking through the space in front of the other characters, playing a kind of ordinary lilting melody. And it was somehow so interesting and so beautiful and so fascinating that it stitched the play together and drew the audience in. A simple guitar, 10 seconds of music every 10 minutes, home run in that instance. Spectacle. Spectacle is what you see. Music is what you hear. Spectacle is what you see with your eyes. And you must write it on the page so people understand the context and the form that you're trying to set for your production. It's the set, lighting, costumes, explosions. In the movies, and good screenwriters use plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacle to tell their plays. They often begin with spectacle. Their whole movies are built around spectacle. The blockbuster, everything blows up, everybody's shot. The plot is terrible. The character's forgettable. There's no real interesting music except for maybe a hit song they plug in there at the end. But that's the problem that Aristotle was addressing. Spectacle is not more important than thought or character. And here's where I'm going to challenge your thinking if you've had a little bit of previous exposure to the Poetics. Plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacle are not a pyramid with plot on the bottom, then character, then thought, diction in the middle, music, and then on the very tippy top is spectacle. That is not what Aristotle was talking about. Aristotle's talking about plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacle as a process of creation. So when you are building a play from the imagination, you first must begin with plot. Then you set your characters. Then thought. You'd think thought would come before plot. Not true. Thought is third. Then you start determining how people are going to speak with diction. Then you add a little music. Then you add a little spectacle. Then you have the whole binding of a play all together. So this is a process of creation for the playwright. Thinking about how do I tell this story? Where do I begin? I'm stuck. I have writer's block. You start with the plot. Then you start with people. Then you start with thinking. Then you start with dialect. Then you start with music. Then you start with spectacle. And I'm saying start because each of these are a moment in the process that you must start, finish, and begin again if you have to. Now, another thing that has to do with plot, and plot is really the most important part of this, in the sense that you have to start with it. So if you don't have a good plot, the rest of it's not going to fall in line. So people tend to not spend a lot of time on plot, and blockbusters spend a lot of time on thinking up spectacle. So here are some thoughts on how to create a really great plot. Something must be at stake that is irrevocable. That means it cannot be undone. I teach my drama students that this is called the theory of irrevocable change. If something happens and all the characters in the play can go back to the way things were before that thing happened, before that irrevocable change occurred, then it's not irrevocable change. It's just something that happened and it should be removed from the show. Irrevocable change usually has to do with danger. It usually means blood, death, murder on the most basic level. Dying is the simplest and most effective way to manage irrevocable change because they are definite and not infinite. There's no coming back. Once you're dead and really dead, there's no coming back. It changes the course of something. It changes the course of our human existence when someone we love dies and doesn't come back. The same stakes must be embedded in the characters and the plot of your play. Now, of course, there are other more subtle and effective ways to create irrevocable change and danger, never going back again moments. It can be a divorce. It could be the way a father speaks to a son. As long as the terms are made clear that there is no going back, that things cannot be undone, that things cannot be set right, then you have the conflict for an effective plot, and you can begin this process of creation that Aristotle wrote about so long ago. Conflict is very important. A friend of mine asked me a long time ago, why in all of your plays, David, does everyone die? Everyone's bleeding and dying. What's wrong with you? Why can't you write a happy ending? And for a moment, it stumped me because I was a young amateur who was working on gut and instinct more than training. But I kind of came around to actually understanding what I had yet to learn in undergraduate and graduate school about the dramatic process. And I said, because a cut takes a long time to heal. And some people never forgive a death. And my friend kind of understood that. He said, oh, so this is about the drama things. And I said, yes, if you want a happy ending, write a song, tell a joke. But if you want something that's effective, that's dramatic, that has a human core, that celebrates the human meme, people are going to be cut. People are going to be disappointed. People will bleed. I also tell some of my dramatic writing students that the most interesting way you can begin any dramatic piece is with this sentence. I'm going to kill you. Right there, everything's at stake. Is he joking? Is he serious? Well, he's not joking, and he is serious because he is discussing, in a roundabout way, the theory of irrevocable change. I'm killing you. So that means there's going to be a fight, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be something that's going to happen next. It's really a wonderful play if you're stuck and you don't know what to do. Even if you're in the middle of the play, have somebody say, I'm going to kill you, and find out what happens. Characters tend to really react in very dramatic and interesting and surprising ways when their lives are threatened. Now, when you think of examples, perfect examples of plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacle, you can look to the classics, but most young people, amateurs who are looking to get trained, don't have that foundation of experience. Now you can assign them to read the play with them, but I find that movies tend to be a better example because they're universal. The live stage is momentary, which is why it's so beautiful. But movies from 50 years ago are the same movie 50 years ago as the same movie you see now. So it can be a common touchstone. People can rent it, they can download it, they can stream it. So one of the most interesting examples of Aristotle's Poetics is the movie Titanic. Yes, that massive blockbuster directed by James Cameron. And it's the perfect example because everything is at stake. There's tremendous spectacle. There are great characters. The speaking, the diction is right. The plot is really full of twists and turns and death and bleeding. There's music. He absolutely was a genius in the way that movie was plotted. So if you want an example in the real world that you can watch at home tonight of what I'm talking about in this conversation, watch Titanic again. And keep in mind, map it out. Plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacle. Know them. Memorize them. Test them against what you know, what you see, and what you think you know, and what you think you've believed. Also, please know this. Storytelling has certain human rhythms that can be exploited by expectation of what comes next inside your audience. The anticipatory human heartbeat is the metronome for the plot of any play. Know that pulse, manipulate that blood flow, create a human moment from which you cannot recover. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.